In terms of the brain neural connections, the decision that our neural pathways supposedly make happens, I think it was something like roughly 7 seconds before either we speak or either we take action. The free market benefits everyone, including those who are worse at practically everything that everyone else does. The kicker is that this happens regardless of people's motives. It seems like we're always walking this tight rope between pleasure and pain, right? If you are in the most animalistic state of all, it's gonna be survival or death, right? Hello and welcome to WS Podcast. My name is Woj Salski. I'll be your host for today. And before we begin, may I just remind you, if you haven't already, please make sure to follow, subscribe, click that button on whichever platform you're using to listen to this show. And I greatly appreciate you listening and following and reaching out. I've had a wonderful start to the year in terms of the podcast. Not only did I switch my hosting to Fountain, which you know already if you've seen the episode with Nick, Fountain's founder, but also I've had people reach out to me, and I recorded an amazing episode with some of them, a bunch of amazing episodes with some of them, and it's wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm very, very grateful. And if you haven't already and you would like to, if you have something that you think is in line with what we talk about on the podcast, whether it's about economy, about philosophy, about spirituality, feel free to reach out. I'm open to talk with you. And if our ideas align, if our hope aligns, then I'm happy to have you on. Of course, excited to hear from you. Other than that, if you haven't, in any capacity seen the show before, please follow the link below. There are many episodes on many different topics, many different books. We are sort of jumping in the middle of a season here, so the ideas that I will be sharing today from another book by Knut Svanholm called Praxeology, the invisible hand that feeds you. Some of the ideas here will be fairly new. Some of them I'll sort of skim over or bring back a previous episode to mention. So there is no really the right place to start listening to my podcast. Simply, there are many different options to choose from. So I'll link below as well, as per usual, any related episodes that I think might be of use to you, or maybe some things that I'll mention along the way, and then I'll write it down and make sure to link it for you. So here we are. Praxeology. I must say this topic in general, alongside Austrian economics school, which is somewhat related, I guess, and is mentioned in the book by Knut, is something fairly new to me. I've only discovered and sort of started reading about it and studying it fairly recently. So I'll do my best to share some ideas with you here today. My aim is to always provide you with some practical, actionable steps based off of the writing of the authors I explore. And of course, I greatly recommend this is the second book by Knut, which I will recommend here, and I do believe it will give you value greatly, as it did to me. So let's maybe start by reading out what praxeology, let's understand what praxeology is. So I'll read a few quotes here to begin, and then I'll have a chat with you. Praxeology does not attempt to predict the future state of the world through a priori axioms. Instead, it employs deduction to distill core insights from human reality into a skeletal yet universal framework, unbiased and clear, while remaining sufficiently meaningful to facilitate the interpretation of data. So, as we will explore in this episode going forward, and I will put a big emphasis on this, so maybe I should mention it to begin with. The way I understand praxeology after reading this book and listening to a few episodes with Max Hildebrand, which I'll link below as well, which are really informative in a sense of understanding this, I guess, science or approach, maybe philosophy of sort, is it's all about understanding what drives us to do things. And instead of offering statistical, numerical, based on theories, views about what's going on or about the world, praxeology attempts and ensures that we stick to the most, as the quote said, a priori. So axioms, I guess an axiom is a guiding principle of a sort, and a priori means it does not necessitate any steps to be taken before it is proven real. So we know by default that must be real. Simply, for example, it must be real that I'm able to speak because I'm right now speaking. Right? So it's an a priori knowledge for me in this situation that I am able to use my vocal cords and my mind, my body to carry sound from my mouth to this microphone and to your ear or to your speaker. So a priori knowledge is where and a priori axioms is where praxeology comes in handy. And as Knut explores very early in the book, this stands in great contrast to any sort of predictive, future-focused, or even present analyzing models that economy and economy science offers us at any given moment. And it is quite informative that literally right under and starting to understand what praxeology is and outlining where it came from and mentioning names such as Ludwig von Mises and the Austrian School of Economics, the quote says, "The concept of making money, quote unquote, has come to signify outpacing the Cantillon effect." Do you remember a Cantillon effect? If you don't, Cantillon effect is this phenomena that whoever is closest to the source of printing or digging out or creating any sort of money benefits the most, and whoever already has that money as a store of value in their reserves and is furthest from the source of the printing is losing the most, right? So the poor get poorer, and those that are in charge of printing more dollars, for example, are the ones benefiting the greatest, at a lesser price. The primary objective of making money is no longer centered around delivering value to others or performing one's job with diligence and efficiency. Instead, it has devolved into a relentless race to multiply existing wealth faster than it loses purchasing power. This artificially induced financial frenzy greatly benefits another facet of the economics charade, generating demand for market expertise that bears no connection to genuine proficiency in real markets. Okay? So I think this is a good moment to point out, and dependent on whether this episode comes out before my really interesting conversation with Paul or after, that's irrelevant. I'll make sure to link below the relevant episode for you. But if you don't know anything about economics, maybe you are not interested in it at all. Well, first of all, economics as science might not be interesting to you and might not even be interested in you in some ways. It's a bit of a play on words here, but economy at its as nature, as its natural state, is interested in you, and so you should be interested in it. I've heard this incredible quote at some point that private economics, psychology affects private economics, and private economics affects public economics, and of course public economics affects psychology, right? So the idea of economy as science emerged to sort of tackle, to make sense for people, supposedly, and that's what's said to be the reason, to make sense of the supposedly rational market behavior. But this actually stands in contrast and in opposition to one of the major, sort of praxeology driven axiom that, which we'll explore in a second, that essentially as humans are inherently irrational, meaning you are not only choosing your decisions and making your taking your actions based off of rational analytical mind, but you also have emotions and you also have incentives which might drive you to do one thing over the other in the short term, long term, and all that. We would have to agree, and I hope you do, that the market in and of itself is irrational. Okay? So if we agree that the market is irrational because we as human creatures are inherently irrational, and what I mean by irrational does not necessarily mean that we're crazy, although in some ways all of us are slightly off kilter. I know I am. But in terms of the idea of being irrational, it's more about the fact that as you are choosing day to day what you will do, how you will earn money, how you will spend money, what will you eat and what won't you eat, with whom do you want to spend time or who would you like to avoid. These choices, as rational and as analytical as they might seem to you, as logical they might seem to you, they are also inherently emotional and therefore inherently irrational. So, for example, I've heard about an experiment that found out that we apparently, in terms of the brain neural connections, the decision that our neural pathways supposedly make happens roughly I think it was something like roughly 7 seconds before either we speak or either we take action. And then when the participants of the experiment were asked what made you do a certain thing, they would find a way to rationalize it. They would find a reason for it, which seems to suggest that while we might be able to find and explain ourselves post action and make sense of why we did it, potentially inherently at the time of the action occurring, we are taking that action somewhat subconsciously, somewhat potentially emotionally driven. We don't know, right? But if we extrapolate this knowledge and take it onto the whole of the market, then it is a very difficult thesis to defend that markets are inherently rational. And I would encourage you, while this is no financial advice, and I'm no expert, I just read books, I'm curious about the world, I talk about these ideas and I talk to people about them. It seems to me that if you ever meet someone who claims that they are an expert and they know that the market is rational and therefore they've developed this amazing model and based off that model you should do X, Y, Z. I'm not saying their model is wrong, but I would urge you to doubt anyone who's so confident in their understanding of what they call a rational market or a rational mind, because inherently all of us are somewhat irrational. Now let's see what is the core of praxeology in terms of our human attitudes and human action. So the core of praxeology, human action, this is the core of praxeology. Human action is always purposeful. People act to change their circumstances in ways they believe will improve their condition. This principle is not something we must test. It is logically undeniable. So if you consider that human action is purposeful behavior, praxeology removes this bias entirely by working from undeniable first principles, and those are the axioms, right? It does not study what people choose, but it is instead grounded in the fact that people always choose. Every action is a decision between alternatives. Every decision reflects a preference, even if that preference is subconscious. So here, let's explore this. So you're right now listening to this show, which I'm really happy about. Me, right now, in the past from your listening, but in my present, hopefully, speaking to your to your future, essentially, into your present, I am choosing to act right now for my benefit. I enjoy doing this. Plus, I hope this endeavor of podcasting to be my full-time employment in due time. And so I'm acting on the presupposition that I will be better off by doing this action right now than not. I also have a cup of coffee that I've made just after eating breakfast a moment ago. When I take a drink of it, what Knut outlines as the praxeological axiom of human action is always purposeful behavior, which basically means acting with intent, relates to the fact that as I think of the future when I drink from this cup, subconsciously I have a presupposed notion of what it will make me feel and potentially nourish my body, right? Or invigor my mind. However you want to put it, essentially, even if you don't know why exactly you're listening to this podcast right now, there must have been some sort of a trigger that made you feel and think that listening to this show in this moment will get you some sort of pleasure, benefit, better state of being going forward. And this is what they point out as logically undeniable, that we always act to change our circumstances for the best, for the better at least. So if you think that all in terms of instincts if we make it as, cut it down to the bone, to the essence, it seems like we're always walking this tight rope between pleasure and pain, right? If you are in the most animalistic state of all, it's gonna be survival or death, right? And then, of course, pleasure is an extension of survival, and pain, death is an extension of pain. Now, because of this, we have this idea of a pursuit of happiness. We're always striving to make ourselves better. This is not to say that we always succeed, and this is not to say that we're always on the right ladder, right? Because this is maybe a broader, more complex topic to tackle, and this will vary from person to person. But just because you have an idea of how to make your life better does not mean that you will choose the right means of doing so. If you want to feel less thirsty, you can choose to drink a cup of water, or you can choose to drink a cup of salty seawater. Both of them seem to be, addressing the same need of feeling less thirsty, but one of them might actually cause you to be even more thirsty in the long run or die, while the other will quench the thirst, right? So the idea of pursuit of happiness as the single fundamental truth being self-evident is, once again, as I reminded you, human action is purposeful behavior. And now let's see how this plays into the pursuit of happiness versus action. At the core of every action is the desire to remove uneasiness. Before anyone acts, three things happen. 1. A person perceives a problem or dissatisfaction. For example, I perceive a problem or dissatisfaction of I'm slightly thirsty and I have this cup. They imagine a future where they felt uneasiness when this felt uneasiness is removed. So I imagine, as I look at the cup or as I think about the cup, that once I drink of it, my thirst or my need for caffeine or my need for sugar, because I did add some sugar there, will be quenched. 3, they believe that a specific action can achieve that goal. So I believe that this cup is the right cup and this moment is the right moment to do this. And so I take a sip. Only when all three of these conditions are met does an action take place. If a person is completely content, they will not act. If they cannot imagine a better state, they will not act. If they do not believe their actions will help, they will not act. And, it's interesting because here in the same chapter, Knut points out that purposeful behavior distinguishes humans from other animals and allows for civilization to arise. And, of course, in praxeological sense, purposeful inaction also counts as action. And as we've already explored in one of the episodes before, I don't remember which one, if you choose not to do something, that's also an action taken. It's just an action of not taking the action. Now, do you remember the quote from Brené Brown that I've quoted, hundreds of times by now on the show, that every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you wish to become. This, in essence, I believe, is what the idea of purposeful action in praxeology points out to. So you have a state of uneasiness, you have a state of lack, you have a state of wanting better, more, different. Then you come up abstractly with a planning protocol how to make that uneasiness go away, and you act upon it. And in essence, and we can now come back to maybe the idea from before. In essence, as long as we know this to be our axiom to see life through, you can start to analyze why and what people do, I think, more efficiently. So this is what really informed me as I read this book and as I explored praxeology and got exposed to more of Austrian School of Economics ideas. The way, and this is, we mentioned it on Paul's episode, that the way people perceive, everyday person perceives economy or perceives economic trends, laws, investments, there is a lot of jargon there, and there is a lot of complexity, which Paul, who is a capital investor of many years, pointed out and agreed with me to be completely unnecessary. It's almost as if someone wanted you not to understand it. Now, Austrian School of Economics and praxeology makes it easier for us to understand economy, to understand how people, why people, what people do, how people act, without the unnecessary fluff of confusion and jargon. Of course, there are some words in this book, and as many others, in terms of Austrian School of Economics, for example, that might be slightly challenging for you to begin with. But for the most part, it is much easier because personally, I believe it is based off truth, and it relies on you discerning facts from any potential facts or potential figures, which makes all the difference, because we are bombarded with information nowadays. There is loads of information, both true, both false, unnecessarily false, unnecessarily maybe necessarily so sometimes, misleading. So learning to discern stuff for yourself and being able to make sense of these things in a way that makes sense easier is certainly something that will benefit you. And I promise to you, as you learn, whether through some of the episodes we've done so far on economic ideas, or whether by reading one of the many books that I've mentioned, or whether just simply by talking to someone who is interested in these ideas, you will find that it's actually much easier. It's actually much more straightforward, and you can also do it. I know, because I did the same. I've not studied economics up until when I actually started learning about finance and markets. And then in the middle of studying economics at university, which of course was offering me the contemporary Keynesian models of economics, which are very, very complicated to navigate, I encountered the sound money principle and Bitcoin and praxeology. And so I had a great opportunity of contrasting these. And basically, I think one is easy and one is complicated. And maybe for a reason. Who knows, right? So let's go to the next. Okay, just a quote to maybe close off the chapter. Praxeology is the logical study of human action, free from the biases of empirical social science. It provides a lens through which we can objectively understand economics, politics, and human behavior. Unlike psychology or sociology, praxeology does not ask why people act, but examines how. By understanding that all human action is purposeful, we gain a deeper awareness of human decision-making, economics, and the fundamental nature of human civilization. Now, in terms of the way you act, and this is quite interesting, I found it really, really fascinating. Knut points out 3 modes of action in our in our universe, let's say. So something to remind you of: entropy, is a measurable physical property that describes disorder, randomness, or uncertainty. In a purely deterministic universe, one where free will could not exist, entropy itself would be impossible. So physics has, in this sense, proven a priori that free will can exist by introducing us to the phenomenon of entropy. Since human action occurs in an uncertain world, we interact with the future in three fundamental ways. 1. Gambling. Acting when outcomes are random and beyond one's control. 2. Speculating. Acting based on patterns, probabilities, and available information. 3. Engineering. Acting to control as many variables as possible to ensure a desired outcome. So, how do you feel you're acting in this moment, for example? In layman's terms, if you haven't grasped it yet, gambling, in this sense, does not mean that you're actually gambling the way you do at a casino or whatever. Gambling in the fundamental way prescribed here is acting when outcomes are random and beyond one's control, right? So, of course, at a casino you gamble to a degree, but since you have a certain level of choice to begin with, you potentially, I guess you are gambling. I don't know. I to be honest, I would have to ask Knut whether it applies here or not. But okay, let's assume that you are gambling. Just so I take it back. Just so I don't confuse you. But gambling, apart from gambling at a casino, let's leave that. Gambling as an idea here is this concept that whenever you act on things without being able to take advantage of anything to influence the outcome, you are gambling. Okay? So probably an equivalent of a gambling action in a real world is, instead of crossing the road looking left and right, you just cross the road with your eyes closed, right? You are gambling on the risk that some car will be actually speeding by and you'll get under the car. Speculating allows us, and I think speculating is that majority of us are doing majority of the time, is when we're acting based on patterns, probabilities, and available information. And so, of course, for example, right now, I am speculating by offering you these ideas because I have a set of available patterns and ideas from the book. I also have a certain level of understanding of these ideas based off of my prior experience with thoughts of such nature. And I'm speculating that by taking part in this podcast and offering them to you, I'll benefit, you'll benefit, and and hopefully I'll get a quality material prepared for you and other listeners. Now the last one, engineering, is when you're acting to control as many variables as possible to ensure a desired outcome. And of course, in terms of engineering on the daily basis, that's probably the closest, in my understanding, to any sort of productive behavior. When you're producing something, whether you're creating it from scratch or whether you're working upon something, or maybe you're working at your job within a limited set of a framework that allows you to impact the future with as little room for error, because you understand how to approach these things. And the more restrictions you put in place of your acting, the more likely the outcome for it to be correct. So potentially, let's say you're making yourself a cup of coffee. If you're, within your house setting, you live in a quiet area, there is nothing happening out of the ordinary, maybe you're alone at home, and you have all the ingredients, you pour it, and you start to maybe boil the water on the stove or whatever. You're likely acting in the engineering way, because you're controlling as many variables as possible, and since it's a controlled setting, it's your house, no one's gonna take the coffee away from you, and no one's gonna take it out of your cup right now. There's not even anyone in the house to interrupt you. Then potentially that acting, from my understanding, could be considered engineering. But I'd love to record the podcast, and I'm sending it out to the universe. I'm gonna reach out to Knut because I'd love to discuss with him this in particular, these three modes. Okay, so let's go and explore what is a free market. Okay, and this is interesting because if you're like me, I'm almost 30. If you're like me and you've been living in a country where there seems to be a lot of voices claiming that providing more and more social support to people is essential and right, and allowing people to reap the benefits of their labor is potentially causing inequality, and the market should be controlled more and more because we need to fix the market. If you've heard that before, then you can resonate with what we're going to explore here right now. The crazy revelation to begin with is apparently completely free market never existed. And this is something that we sort of touched upon when we explored The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth. And of course, when we talked about Bitcoin and its implications. Think about it for a second. Free market economy has never existed in the history of the modern human. I don't know what happened before, 10,000 years ago, who knows? But in the past 2,000 years, as we understand them, there has never been a fully, completely free market economy. Now, what is a free market? What is a free market? This is important because, I'm saying it never existed. What is it? A free market has no central planner. It's not a place, a group, or a building, but a process. The organic result of people exchanging goods and services while retaining ownership of their property. Those who possess their property can direct it to wherever they believe it the most beneficial for them to reach their desired goals. In such a system, people become both ends and means. They pursue their own goals while, knowingly or not, helping others reach theirs. We'll go into capitalism in a second, but this is huge, okay? So a free market is a process where individuals and groups and nations potentially exchange services and products voluntarily with full autonomy to reach their desired needs and goals, such as to have a cup of coffee or to record a podcast, and they retain the right to their private property. Okay? So, for example, in a fully free market economy, if I go to the market and I need to buy some coffee, and with me I have a pen. Let's assume that money as a means of exchange does not exist just yet. In a free market economy, I can give that pen to whoever needs a pen and has an ability to obtain coffee for me. And since both of us are benefiting from the trade, it's a voluntary trade. I've not pushed them to do any deal with me, and they are not forcing me to accept the coffee from them. And there is no one else to take from this transaction. There's no third party effectively. That's a free market trade occurring, right? Now, this is probably the essential thing to understand straight away. And why? Because you might say, oh, I'm living in a free market. I'm choosing to go to the shop, buy these things, and they choose to sell them to me, and everyone's happy. Well, the problem here is that unless you live in a country in the world that I've never heard about, you are living in a jurisdiction that has a taxation in place and has regulation in place. And yet again, the example. I go to the market to sell this pen and to obtain coffee. But now, let's assume that there is actually a taxman sitting in the marketplace, making sure that when each trade occurs, the benefits of the trade are being split between the individual that gets the benefits of the trade and the government or the tax, revenue organization or whoever, or maybe a local thug with a gun. So when I'm exchanging this pen for a coffee, not only do I get less coffee because half of that coffee is drunk by the taxman, but also my counterparty does not receive a whole pen, but half of it is, chiseled away and donated to the taxman's hands. Okay? This is why, in essence, even before we dive any deeper into machinations of the market and what causes inflation and stuff, this is why you've never lived in a free market economy. Because at any point, whether you buy things, whether you earn, whether you spend, whether you exchange, at any step, there's almost always someone who is trying to benefit from your trade, even though they have not contributed anything for that trade to occur. Okay? They are effectively just participating in a trade with coercive means because no one invited them to the party, but they are enjoying the party. So on a macro scale, the network of individual voluntary exchanges is what forms a society or civilization. It also creates a pattern of interrelations that we call the market. The market creates an opportunity for human beings to engage in production solely for the purpose of trade. We can perform tasks demanded by the market rather than working for ourselves directly and achieve better outcomes for everyone involved. Every step forward on the road toward a market that satisfies the highest amount of human desires requires more advanced technologies. These advancements, in turn, require a further specialization of tasks. Contrary to what some politicians assert, the free market benefits everyone, including those who are worse at practically everything that everyone else does. The kicker is that this happens regardless of people's motives. Peaceful interpersonal relationships provide better opportunities for everyone, incentivizing us to become friends through our shared, logically provable values. Praxeology illuminates how deeply we are connected and how rudimentary it is to appreciate other human beings, flawed as they may be. Understanding these concepts and the laws we can derive from them tells us why cooperation and peace are vastly superior to isolation and violence as tools for reaching our individual goals. All you need is love, and probably so. So let's just stay with that for a second, and then we'll go to capitalism. The claim has been made there already, and we'll explore that in more detail in a second, that in a free market where everyone is willingly participating and everyone is everyone is benefiting from their participation and has the right to the benefits of their labor, time, capital, of their efforts essentially, according to praxeology, everyone is better off. Even the person who is the least productive and the most helpless is better off in a society where everyone is voluntarily participating and producing and creating better, more efficient, new, and getting wealthier. This is something that, over the past few years we've had a whole climate change emergency discussion in the public sphere, and probably so. I've heard again and again, and please check it for yourself. It makes sense to me in terms of what I understand from this book and others. Apparently, when people rise out of poverty, they start caring more about the environment. And if you think about it, it's completely obvious, right? When you're struggling to make your ends meet, you're not likely to think whether or not you should be recycling or whether or not you should buy from a more sustainable source. Which is why a big claim, which is completely contrary to this idea that wealth is something that should be avoided while we are struggling to make the world more clean, more equitable, and more sustainable, is this idea that if you raise as many people as possible into a higher standard of living, the world will get better. And I think this is axiomatically, praxeologically true. The more people we raise out of poverty by producing more, by creating more efficiently, by offering better products on a wider scale, and essentially unshackling the creativity and entrepreneurship of our incredible inventors in the world, the quicker people will start caring about the long-term horizon. And this is this time preference thing, which we've talked about extensively so many times. Just to remind you, high time preference and low time preference are often quoted when people are discussing the choices people make in terms of saving, investing, consuming. When you have high time preference, that basically means that you'd rather consume now than keep it for the future. If you have low time preference, that means that you're more inclined to wait for something to occur or to wait to consume. And in a society of high time preference, there is little to none saving and investing. And in a society of low time preference, there is a lot of saving and investing because people are betting that the future will be better than the present. This is why inflation is such a big problem, because if you're struggling to make your ends meet, and we come back with ease to that first first paragraph that I've read to you, which is this concept of making money has come to signify outpacing the Cantillon effect, essentially outpacing inflation. If what you earn today will be worth less by half tomorrow, you are much more likely to spend it today than to keep it till tomorrow. So inflation inherently disturbs people's ability for low time preference. You simply cannot wait for a better future if you know that the future will be worse. You're much more likely to consume now, and this is completely in line with unsustainable ideas, unsustainable policies, unsustainable choices. If all I need to think about right now is how to warm my house, maybe in an extreme circumstance I will burn this table to keep it warm. It's not eco-friendly, it's not healthy for me and my family to be burning a table inside the room. But if I have no other choice, and I know that my family is gonna die if I don't, then I will do it. And this is the dire problem of high time preference, which stems in great way from a broken monetary system. That's a tangent, sorry. Okay, so let's jump into the culprit of it all. Many people say that capitalism is bad. Personally, I don't believe so. Let's explore what Knut has to say. What is capitalism? Whether you like it or not, you're already a capitalist if you own capital goods. And odds are you do. Proper economic calculation is only possible after the introduction of money in a free market. Most people own some form of capital goods, and money best serves those who do. Capitalism is simply a system in which people get to keep their capital and use it as they choose. Private property to use. Put differently, capitalism is the social order that naturally arises when theft and violent intervention don't interfere. When actors trade for mutual benefit, a pattern emerges. We call that pattern the market. And important here, no good is ever valued solely based on its intrinsic properties, because there is no such thing as intrinsic value. We're always willing to pay more for something if we think it will satisfy our most urgent desire more quickly, whatever that desire may be. People are generally willing to pay more for food served in a restaurant than the food they must prepare themselves. A home with a stunning view in an international metropolis is typically worth more than one in a dull, one-horse town in the middle of nowhere. This is why the same house can feel like a bargain to one buyer and a rip-off to another. These are not arbitrary market quirks. They are reflections of individual subjective preferences. And let's explore now why capitalism, in its essence, is not the villain. And this chapter I basically highlighted everything. Here is a surprising but crucial truth. We are all capitalists, consumers, laborers, entrepreneurs, and producers. Sometimes all on the same day. These aren't personality types or social classes. They are modes of action. They are modes of action. A capitalist, you're a capitalist when you save money, when you save your time, when you save your resources. You're a consumer when you spend money, when you spend your resources. You're a laborer when you work instead of resting. You're an entrepreneur when you take on risk for a reward, maybe because you're investing. And you're a producer when you build or buy tools that make production possible. Money allows us to perform economic calculations which enable us to measure our current state and plot a course toward what we want. Money also lets us distinguish between capital and income, and that distinction matters. Income is whatever amount a person can use within a specific period without sacrificing a part of their capital or capital goods. Spending your capital on consumer goods is stealing from your future self in this sense. So when you're spending your savings, you are stealing from your future self. Understanding the distinction between capital and income allows people to live within their means, an expression that praxeologically speaking means precisely that. Blaming free market capitalism for society's flaws is like blaming biology for hunger. Capitalism is simply the most powerful method humans have discovered to get more with less. When people voluntarily exchange, they maximize value for both sides. Furthermore, the system self-corrects. Producers suffer losses when they fail to satisfy customer needs. Consumers choose another producer's goods and services instead, and thus the market rewards those producers who best meet their customers' needs. Now compare that to politics. When politicians and bureaucrats fail, everyone else pays the price. A failed policy affects the entire population, and the people responsible rarely suffer real consequences. They may not be re-elected, but there is no way of knowing whether being in office was the real goal of the politician's actions in the first place. Let's compare votes cast in a democracy to free market price signaling through capital allocation. In a democracy, only a majority of people who all need to compromise their beliefs to some extent get to decide policies. However, in the free market, every purchase is a vote, and every participant is at least indirectly involved in every decision, since every action impacts the market as a whole. The wealthier you are, the more votes you're allowed to cast. And in a genuinely free market, financial success is equivalent to helping others fulfill their needs and wants. And I just wanted to find the quote by... where was it? Okay, well, we'll go into that in a second. So, let's see. We've been riffing for some time. Throat's dry. So, do you understand now what capitalism is? It's not a political approach. It's not a system in which some get rich while others don't. It's purely a system in which all of us live at all times unless there is some sort of interference in this market dynamic. And of course, you know that there is. Not only there is interference in a way that money is broken. So, you know, there are people and organizations in the world that can print money for nothing while you struggle to, you go to work, you spend your time and effort to earn that money. And if you save money that someone else can print, as we've explored before, you are the one being robbed whenever they print, because your value stored in that money is diluted, right? In the same way, if you're living in a country where there are taxes, and I'm afraid there are not many, I don't think there's any country out there that does not have a level of taxation, whatever you earn, whatever you spend, is to a certain degree coercively taken away from you. Coercively meaning against your right. I mean against your decision, against your voluntary participation. And I can already hear, I've already had a discussion like that with one of my friends when he said something like, yeah, but I want to pay taxes, they help others and they're good for the society. And fair enough, maybe that's your approach, but that doesn't negate the fact that they are coercive in nature. Just try not to pay taxes for a moment and see what happens. Of course, you know, and you know it praxeologically holds true, that no one's going to allow you to not pay those taxes for long. It's a great crime, and you will see how peaceful your government is the moment you try to avoid it, And I'm not encouraging you to do so. To the contrary, it's too serious a thing to avoid. So let's talk about freedom now, and this is going to be our last sort of major topic of the discussion. Freedom and government. To understand human behavior, especially violence, we must confront a hard truth. All governments are inherently coercive. The market depends on voluntary action. Government, by its very nature, implies force. The two are incompatible. Taxation is the price we pay to live in an uncivilized society. So long as any group holds coercive power, true equality is impossible. People may share equal rights among themselves, but not with their rulers. True human rights must be universal. Anything less is a privilege, not a right. And here we come to the only universal human right, according to Praxeology, which is the right to be left alone. The right to be left alone. Essentially, the right to do as you want, as long as you don't infringe on another person's the right to be left alone. The inequalities of wealth, ability, talent, and income among people are all essential for the free market to function. Freedom and order arise from people's non-violent efforts to reach their ends. The market is not survival of the fittest, winner takes all, law of the jungle type of competitive environment, regardless of what mainstream media government mouthpieces might insist. The free market is, rather, an antidote to such poisonous modes of conduct. Only by recognizing that the best way of helping yourself is to help others, and vice versa, can we debunk the propaganda and elevate ourselves to become more civilized to one another. Argumentation is the use of linguistic means to acquire a desired end, namely changing another person's opinion or understanding of a subject. And an incredible quote from Ludwig von Mises: "Socialism is an alternative to capitalism as potassium cyanide is an alternative to water." So I've already alluded to it, but I'll just, highlight it again. Wherever there is coercion, wherever there is a someone giving you permission to do something, or doesn't give you permission to do something, you're not inherently free, right? If we accept that the only human right is the right to be left alone, and therefore we derive from that right the idea that whenever you do something that infringes on someone else's right to be left alone, you shouldn't do that, but everything else is completely up to you. At that point, you will know that you're a free individual and you live in a free society. And of course, as Knut pointed out, this is a hard truth that none of us is really free. And we've explored it in the previous episode about Bitcoin, everything divided by 21 million, which I'll link below as well. If you remember from there, you are a slave to the system to the degree that you pay in taxes and all kinds of, contributions that are not voluntary, but you have no other choice and you have to do them, right? So This is, of course, something we should expect and accept to a degree. I don't think the right way to go about this knowledge is to, try and cause an upheaval or undermine this state of events. I think it's just something that we should understand and observe. And as we know this to be true, and as we start to understand why, the way the market is behaving is not necessarily truly because of free market dynamics, rather it's maybe because of someone intervening with the value of money or with the different subsidies or social programs that redistribute wealth and stop one group of people from getting wealthy while helps others to get wealthy, or empowers parasites, or empowers certain groups of power to get into power, and so on. The invitation from this book and from this podcast from me to you is to simply be able to discern the truth of what's going on more efficiently, just better, to get better at understanding what is going on around you at any given moment. And as I mentioned earlier, understanding economy and how it works is not as difficult as it may seem. And so I would encourage you to explore this book and start learning about these ideas. I'll share with you one last quote, which is about the price of tomorrow. And as I already mentioned, that was a big part of the book by Jeff Booth, The Price of Tomorrow. Now, to be honest, I'll keep it. I've already mentioned to you, the low time preference and high time preference. So I'll leave it for you to explore the book and read about that in more detail. But I'll link below as well the link to the episode by the episode about the Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth. Now, I was thinking, we've covered a lot, and as you can tell, I hope I did a good job, but as you can tell, these are quite complicated ideas, and I'm trying to make sense of them myself as well. So thank you for sticking with me and offering me your time to understand it. Hopefully it helps you as well. I was thinking what kind of invitation I should offer you this week. Every week we have some challenge or, an invitation, or from our guests sometimes we have a certain idea to ponder. My invitation for you today is to check 3 things and connect them, because I've recently had an interaction with one of my family members where I've learned that they were given a raise this year, which is great, but when they told us how much of a raise that was in percentage terms, basically after checking what's the level of inflation in the country that they live in, I've summarized by saying that essentially, they will be earning less than the year before in real terms. So while the quantity of money on their paycheck seems to have grown, the actual quality, the value of that money in real purchasing power has shrunk, because inflation rate year on year is higher than the rate that they were offered of increase in their pay. And so, as you might be going through this right now, I will be getting a potential raise and promotion in the coming months as well. I thought it might be quite informative for you to check these things. So I would like to invite you to check to check two things and understand the connection. So first of all, check what is the inflation rate of the past year, 2 years in your country. And I don't mean only check it on the official CPI or whatever index that your country might be adhering to, but also dig deeper and try to find a few different sources, maybe even sources that might not be the mainstream sources offered by the first page of Google. Maybe use some AI to find alternative sources for you, but try to truly estimate what is the rate of inflation in your country. And I know, right now we're going through some turbulent times in terms of, the price of oil, and that will affect the price of your produce that you get at a local shop and stuff. So try to estimate what is the real inflation that you are living through. And then the second step is check your earnings. So take a look at your paycheck, take a look at your salary, or if you're a person that earns on their own accord, then take a look at your budget and stuff and figure out, is it gonna grow over the coming year to outpace inflation, or are you effectively earning less this year than the year before? Of course, this is not a nice experiment to take part in, potentially because many of us will find out that we are losing on this dynamic. But considering that this is something that will affect all of us and is affecting all of us all the time, I don't believe there is any point in pretending that that's not the case. I think for your own benefit and for the benefit of those around you, your loved ones, your family, you should be aware of this, because that is the first step. The first step to change your situation is to understand in what situation you are. And so I would urge you to check it out. And once you've checked the inflation, once you've checked your earnings, potentially as an additional point, check how much you're paying in taxes. And once you've done all that calculation, figure out how could you potentially make your situation better, and truly, truly consider investing in assets that cannot be inflated at a whim of some central bankers, push of a button. And this is no financial advice. I don't know any better than anyone else. I'm just trying to understand how the world works and help you to navigate it. And I think it's an important topic. So we've been going on it for 6 episodes now. I think it's about time you take action. I hope you do, and I hope it helps. Other than that, please make sure to follow, subscribe. If you haven't, check out Fountain app already. Please do. There is a space there as well to join the chat, so you can chat directly with me. It's a great platform. I definitely recommend. And have a wonderful, wonderful week. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.